Hello again, and today I'm testing out a lens for APS-C mirrorless cameras, the Zonlai 14mm f2. The only other Zonlai lens I've tested was their 22mm f1.8 optic, which I really liked. This 14mm lens follows in its brother's footsteps as a manual aperture, manual focus lens, with a bright maximum aperture, but this time we get a very wide angle. I'd like to thank Zonlai for sending me a review copy of this lens for testing, although as usual, this is a totally independent review. 14mm is the full frame equivalent of 21mm, which is fantastically wide, without straying too far into ultra-wide angle territory, so it'll give you nice dramatic images without pushing your subject too far away. And f2 is a pretty bright maximum aperture for such a wide angle lens, letting you shoot more easily in darker conditions. It's a somewhat low budget lens, costing £200 or just over $200, so not cheap, but less than a competition, and it's available for the mirrorless Fuji X, Canon EOS M and Sony E mounts. As I mentioned, its image circle can cover an APS-C sensor. Here's what its images would look like on a full frame camera without any cropping. Let's take a look at build quality first. The lens's body is tough, being made of metal, and it weighs 400 grams. The aperture ring turns very smoothly, but perhaps a little too loosely. It's easy to accidentally move it and change its setting, which is annoying. The focus ring is just right though, also turning smoothly and with just the right precision for such a wide angle lens. There's no hyperfocal distance scale though, which I find handy on wide angle lenses. Video makers might be interested to see that the lens focus breathes a little. The image zooms in a little bit as you focus more closely. You cannot fit any filters onto this lens's body directly, but it does come with a special lens hood that allows you to screw in a 72mm filter. That's always a nice feature to see. However, you can only put a very slim filter on there. I tried it with this rather thick Hoya polarizing filter mounted on, and as you can see, some pretty serious vignetting ensued. Overall, the lens's build quality is fine, and shooting in manual focus with such a wide angle lens won't take long to get used to. My only pet peeve was the rather loose and clickless aperture ring though. Alright now, image quality. I'm testing on a Sony a5100 here with its 24 megapixel APS-C sensor. At f2, we see some good sharpness in the middle of the image, but rather a lot of magenta chromatic aberration. Yes, the lens is focused correctly here. The corners unfortunately are pretty soft, and even more colour fringing is visible. Stop down to f2.8 for an improvement in contrast, if not resolution, but now the middle of the image looks fantastic. Stop down to f4 for an edge of extra sharpness in the middle, but the corners still fail to impress. Quality slowly improves there at f5.6 and peaks at f8 looking quite sharp, although sadly we still see rather a lot of chromatic aberration there. Stop down further to f11 and the image starts to get softer again from the effect of diffraction. So overall, we're looking at fairly poor image quality here, particularly in the image corners, which are plagued by softness and chromatic aberration. Alright then, let's move on and look at distortion and vignetting. Distortion isn't a real problem here, only if you look closely can you see a slight barrel projection with a little moustache pattern. Vignetting, or darkness in the corners, is noticeable at f2 but not strong. Stop down to f2.8 and it's already greatly reduced, so vignetting and distortion aren't really a big deal for this lens. Next, close-up image quality. Now this lens can focus as closely as about 20 centimeters to your subject, just about close enough for smaller subjects. At f2, the close-up image quality is a bit softer than at normal distances, and the colours look a bit wrong here. The good news is though that if you stop down the aperture to f2.8, then everything comes up roses again. Now let's see how the lens works against bright light, an important question for such a wide angle optic. We see rather a lot of flaring here unfortunately, but contrast remains pretty strong. And finally, bokeh. It's possible to get somewhat out of focus backgrounds if you're close to your subject at a wide aperture here. This lens's bokeh is pretty busy looking, really, especially at f2. There's lots of strong outlining to be seen. Overall, the Zonlai 14mm f2 offers a nice wide angle with a bright aperture, but its image quality really struggles under scrutiny, and shooting with it at its widest aperture should probably be avoided. Its price of £200 is a bit lower than similar competing lenses though, so you get what you pay for here.